Hey everybody out there, my name is Tommy and this is my channel, Counting on the Big Sleep, and can't wait for this year to be over with. Absolutely one of the worst years of my life. As I was talking earlier in in other videos. Um, at 57 I lost my job of 9 years, all to my own fault really. But since then, I've gone through three other jobs that I've worked and fell into a pretty deep depression. And so it was hard to focus on the jobs, and I would wind up working for a little bit, and then I would wind up quitting, you know, and then I'd wind up, working again and then quitting. And I did it three times in a row. I had three different jobs, three very good paying jobs too, which would have kept me, in my apartment and not in the current situation. I'm not living in my van. I am staying at my cousin's house. Uh, he asked me to come over here. Let me tell you the story. You know, um, my rent and lease was up on December 1st. So, on November 29th, I told her that first of all, I was a month and a half behind rent, but she also had $1,350 of my deposit. So, at the time, if I would have moved out on December 1st, I wouldn't have owed nothing. She would have kept security deposit, should have been happy, you know. But on November 29th, and we had a big snowstorm here. You know, we had a big snowstorm, and at the week earlier to that, I've been at my cousin's house, just working around, talking to my sister, and working around in the yard and stuff, just to help out. But on November 29th, I told my landlord that, oh, you know what? Let me turn around. Let me turn around. You're looking at traffic, so I am not there. Sorry about the lighting. I'm in my car. I'm out in the country-ish area. But on November 29th, I told my landlady that I was unable to move out since I didn't have a job, or I didn't, I couldn't live out in the snow, in the van. I mean, I could have, but I told her I wouldn't be out, and she got really, really mad, and saying the lease is up, you need to be out on December 1st. So, where I live, I kind of know that the law goes more for the tenant and stuff. So I told her, well, this was all in text message each other. So I told her, listen, I'm not going to be out. I found a place for $750 a month. I said, I just need to get a month and the security deposit together, and I'll give it to them, and I'll move out. I told her I'd be like, I just need to get $1,500. Just hold on. Let me get a job. Let me, finish. I know I would owe you this month, basically, but you know, um, let me just get a job. And I was planning on getting a job. I had a couple interviews at the time. So I told her, just let me do that. And she said, no, you need to be, basically be out. And then the very next day, she texted me and said that, okay, I agree to those terms. Let's do something called a cash to keys deal. She said that she would give me $1,500 to move out of the place. And really, I just needed $1,500 really to move out of the place. Before I lived there, I rented a room from a friend, and he was only gonna. And I talked to him about moving in once I got a job, and he talked about me moving in, renting the room for $600 a month. So, I did tell her that I needed more than I actually needed, but so, she offered me cash for keys, $1,500 to move out on December 8th. I think today is about the 9th or 10th or something, 12th, I don't know, I can't remember. I'm uploading this the same day I film it. So, I agreed to that and cleared out all my stuff and talked to my friend. I said, hey man, I'm going to come out there. I'll give I'll pay you 2 months worth of rent, $1,200. That would leave me with, about $300. Plus, I was also doing the plasma center, selling my plasma twice a week. So I was making around about $130 a week off of that too, which helped with gas and food. So I was planning on doing that. But I had been out, at my cousin's, about a week or two earlier. I stayed out here for a week, while I was trying to figure things out. He's the one that really helped me figure things out, by having me out there in the yard doing work, physical work, and giving me the time and the space to, just to think about how I wanted to handle the apartment situation, I kind of felt like this whole year I've kind of like rolled over and I didn't fight hard enough for the things that I needed or wanted. I was very depressed and I I couldn't I didn't have that drive in me to go, to actually to do the things that I needed to get done, no matter if they were hard or not. You know, I couldn't I couldn't get myself to that mindset, until I got out here and my to visit my sister. My sister has Alzheimer's um, and diabetes, so she has some health problems. I'm 58. She's 20 years older than I am, so she is like 75. So, but like I was saying, he got me out there doing yard work and stuff, which is the thing that I needed to do, you know, to be able to clear my head. I needed to do some physical kind of work. So that's when I came up with the idea of I called my guy I used to live with, and then he told me $600 a month. So that's when I told her, hey, I need $150. Well, I told her I need $750 for rent and $750 for security deposit. And that's when the next day she called me and said, we'll do a cash for keys. I'll give you $1,500. Here, you can move out. I said, that's fine. That's fine. And some people may not like that because, the landlord shouldn't have had to give me anything, but because of the way the laws are set up, which I'm grateful for. I mean, if I would have had to, move out the exact same day, we had a blizzard, and even though it wasn't her problem, it was my problem. But I had to solve it the best way I could, whether, it was fair to the other person or not. It was my problem, but I had to solve it, and easily she could have just said, hey, let me stay for a month, stay for a month, and then, after that, we'll go from there, because at that point, she, had been broken even, honestly. So, but that's the way that whole situation went. So I was ready to move into my friend Chris's house and give him the money for security deposit. And then my cousin called me and asked me if I wouldn't mind coming out here staying, while, keeping an eye on my sister and helping out around the house, And even though I was moving into that direction, I wanted to move in that direction because my son's out there. That's a whole nother story. I have to figure out how to split my time between this and seeing him because we have a very close relationship, me and him. Uh, and in, you know, I'll go into that later, but the last time I seen him, he was very upset, because I hadn't seen him in, about a week, you know, but he was upset about a lot of things. And just me and him are very close, I would say. You know, I try to understand what he wants to say, even though he says it backwards half the time. He'll start a story at the end, and then I'll have to work him all the way to the beginning to get that story, you know. But he was upset too, so I have to figure out how to split my time between staying here and, keeping my sister company and her occupied, and make sure he takes her medicine, make sure she eats and stuff. My lights go off. My lights went off in the back there. Turn them back on. There we go. So I have to figure out how to split up my time all through this winter, which kind of sucks, How to do everything at once, it's hard. I want to spend time with my sister because she has Alzheimer's, and she tells me the same stories. Every day. It'll be the same story every day, like every hour, or not hour, every like 20 minutes actually. She'll finish off a story, and then she'll tell me the same exact story, and I'll say, oh, and I play along with it, because it makes her happy and stuff, But during the whole day, I will listen to like she'll tell me maybe a total of 4 to 5 stories, different ones, but it'll be the same story over and over and over again. So each time I gotta kind of act surprised and and say stuff, But and she talks a lot about you know not to, just, happy. So I try to bring the happy stuff. I try to ask her stuff about when she was a child, you know, um, to make her remember her childhood, maybe the happy moments that she had had and stuff, you know. So I try to do that, so I'm not trying to, you know, see, it's hard in the family because, um, they're harder people than I am. I'm more, it's like my cousin. He's a great guy. I love him to death. But, he could be as hard as steel, where I can't be like that. I'm more flexible, more, you know, I'm not like that. It's a hard thing to describe. It's like, it's like saying, he's steel and I'm more plastic. I'm bendable. I'm flexible. But when he's determined about how he wants something done, he's determined that way. And which is great. Everyone can't be the same. Everyone can't be the same. But so I've been staying out here, taking, helping take care of my niece. I'm sorry, my sister. But I don't know how to balance everything. I have to get a job, to make money. That's for sure. And I can't stay here forever either. As much as, I want to, I would like to see her every day and, bring her back, good memories. I want to make, her ending as pleasant as possible. That's my only goal, really, to do. So, but that's what I've been doing. You know, Basically, that's how I got out of my apartment. We did a cash for keys. I was on my way to move to a different apartment. And then I got sidetracked over here, which in a way I kind of felt that, that's what God wanted, because Jason's a very hard and very proud man. So for him to come and ask me, to do something like that for him, you know, I'm sure it was harder, but I'm glad to do it. But I also know that I have to find a job, and I have to figure out how I can balance all of it some way or another. That's the hard part. I just do the best I can. And, and I will continue to go to church. I'm still going to go to church on Sundays, drive up there, to, where I used to live, and go to that church. I was talking to my son about it a little bit, trying to get, him to come with, but he's not ready for that. He's not ready, so that's fine. It's fine. You know, I tell him all the time, God's love's eternal. No matter how bad you are, he still will love you. You know, He will. You know, that's just the way it is. The grace and the mercy is just endless. That's just, I'm not just saying that, so you can go out there and, and do things that are rotten on purpose. I'm not saying that at all. I know, I'm only human. I don't know, honestly, really what happens when you die. But I do believe in eternal grace and eternal mercy. I don't believe that you will be burning in the depths of hell, if you are a gay person or something. Or, I think there's forgiveness for everybody. And no matter what sin you've done, even you can say Charles Manson, there's grace, and, there's grace for him too if he so chose it, so. But, everyone, but I don't know what happens, but when you die, but I think it'll be okay. I think it'll be okay. You may not know nothing. You may be a total different situation. Who knows? You could be reincarnated. There's so many different possibilities. You don't know. You don't know for sure. And people usually tell you they know for sure, or BS, because they'll quote, everything, yeah, the Bible is true. Well, you got to remember the Bible was written in ancient times, and, and back then, women were considered property, in ancient times. So the Bible was wrong about that, because women aren't property at all. They're equal, They're, they're equal people just like everybody. No matter what skin color you are, you're equal. Everyone's equal. No matter what gay or lesbian or, or if you want to be a she-male or, what are they, a cross-dresser? That's what we used to call them when we were kids. Guys that would dress like women, we call them a cross-dresser. So they were back there, back then, people like that were around. So, but I think it's okay. It's okay. If a parent wants to take their child to see a drag queen read a story, then it's up to the parent. Raise your kid how you want to raise your kid. That's all. And then he'll raise his kid the way he wants to raise his kid, which may not even be your way. Don't take it all too seriously. But I just wanted to let everyone know that's what I've been doing for this year. Out here right now, living with my my sister, my nephew, and his wife. Just trying to help out as much as I can, and then also trying to figure out a balance somehow, if I can do that. All right. So for Tommy, me, counting on the big sleep, counting on the days until the end is there. I'll even let you know when the end comes close. All right, everybody. You guys have a good night. Bye.